Infiltration is something that continues to be a problem for the left, and we argue about what's wrong with us and what are we doing wrong. Is it our ideas are wrong? But the thing that's I think hard for a lot of people to deal with is the fact that they will break us up from the inside. The authorities, the FBI, Homeland Security, the local police will break us up from the inside, and we have to be able to deal with this. And it's not that hard. What I'm going to show you is that from BC, from ancient times, India, Rome, China. There were informants, there were secret police. Coming down to our own time, it's the same thing. And the patterns are pretty consistent because this is a feature of class society. Infiltration is a feature of class society. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how this starts in the ancient times. We're going to start with the classical era, and then we're going to work up to the 1790s, 1780s, and then on to 2024. Every era there's been infiltration, and from 1790 onward we're going to see that with the left it's been persistent. Okay, so let's start here. Bum 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 bum. So we see here in ancient Egypt, we don't know exactly if there was infiltration, but we know there were strikes. There was one recorded strike, so we can assume there's been others. And there were spies. The pharaoh had spies. So we know that the ruling class was using spies to infiltrate the population to some extent. Now, here's a little more concrete. 300 BC, this is a famous text, the Arthashastra. And it's by the same people, I think, the same author who's credited with the Upanishads. So very classical, foundational literature of Indian civilization. And we see that there's all kinds of spies that are advised to be created. The Arthashastra, is a text on how to run a nation, how to be a king. And so we see there's spies under the guise of a fraudulent disciple, ascetic practicing austerities, a classmate, colleague, a firebrand, which that's somebody who like they play with fire, a poisoner, a mendicant woman, right? Poor people. So have spies everywhere. Here, the collector general shall employ spies disguised as persons endowed with supernatural powers, faith healers, magician, priests, clergy. Here, and let's see. This text also it advises people, these spies, to entrap people. Now that's 300 BC, and we see that in ancient Greece there are also spies that warned of this uprising, and there was a military leader, Pausanias, that wanted to collaborate with the Persian king Xerxes or Xerxes, and so spies were used to undo that rebellion. Here, now, we see in ancient India, there were spies that would entrap people. We're going to talk about how this played out in ancient Rome too. But before we get there, we see this kind of controversial theory, but it makes sense to me. Everybody knows St. Paul's the founder of Christianity. The books attributed to St. Paul are the oldest in the New Testament. And then we see that there's this author, Dies Voskulin, I think that's how you pronounce his name, or their name, I don't know. And so they point out the fact that Paul is credited with being a persecutor of the Christians, but we don't really know what that means. So what this author points out in that ancient Rome, there were intelligence officers. There were intelligence officers who were tasked with rooting out dissent and entrapping people. When we go to the quotes I have, there's Epictetus, 100 AD. So 20 years after Paul was said to be doing his thing, or the first book of the Bible was said to be written, we have Epictetus, the philosopher, saying this: a soldier dressed like a civilian sits down by your side and begins to speak ill of Caesar. And then you too, just as though you received from him some guarantee of good faith in the fact that he began the abuse, tell likewise everything you think. And the next thing is, you are being led off to prison in chains. So Epictetus here, very soon after the start of Christianity, is letting us know that in ancient Rome, a plainclothes soldier, basically a narc or a cop, sits down next to you and says, "Oh, the government's fucked up, isn't it?" And you say, "Yeah, the government's fucked up." Next thing you know, you're under arrest for treason. Okay, so let's go back to this timeline. So we see there is this theory that Paul was basically an infiltrator or a narc, and his version of Christianity was dictated by the Roman authorities. Okay, controversial, but this evidence adds up over time. We see 100 years after the start of Christianity, Philostratus says of Rome, to live in a city where there are so many eyes to see and so many ears to hear things which are and are not is a serious handicap for anyone who desires to play at revolution, unless he be wholly intent upon his own death. So he's saying there are revolutionaries in Rome, right? It's not one or two. It's a common thing for people in Rome to be talking about revolution. On the contrary, it prompts prudent and sensible people to walk slowly, even when engaged in wholly permissible pursuits. He's saying, even if you're doing something that's legal and legitimate, you have to be careful for being mistaken for being a revolutionary. At the same time, there were the frumentari and agentes in rebus, or agents in rebus. These were the secret police. The frumentari started out handling grain, and then from that, they became intelligence officers in Rome. And just like with the Arthashastra 300 BC, so what is that, 500 years before, in ancient India, their job was to entrap people, to know of plots. So already in the ancient world, we know there's constant revolution and infiltration. It's part of class society. Ancient China, 771 BC, 1420 AD. We have the famous Sun Tzu, who people always call Sun Tzu. He says, having local spies means employing the services of the inhabitants of a district. So you should have informants in different areas. Then, just like the Romans had the frumentari and agentes in rebus, and the ancient Indians had spies everywhere, so too did the Tang Dynasty establish these groups. There was the Jingyi Wei, I don't know the exact tones, but they were the same thing. Spying on subjects, rooting out rebellion, rooting out disloyalty, and then they became the Eastern Depot, see? So, again, the governments, the ruling class is always intent on rooting out dissent through subversion, through lying, through manipulation, and a lot of times this becomes entrapment just to accuse people, just like during the Inquisition. You accuse people of dissent, you accuse people of heresy, you accuse people to get power, right? So this is the way the ruling class maintains control. In 1184, we have the Inquisition in Europe, okay? Salem witch trials, we know about that. And again, that was rooting out dissent, women that were not obeying, and it's also just a way to divert dissent from the government, right? To focus on internally the masses, the populace, instead of the government, and women made a convenient scapegoat, but it wasn't just women during the Inquisition. Now, then we have slave owners, right? During slavery, there's a book called A Snitch in Time, which I use a lot in this timeline, and it talks about how during slavery, there were constant fear of slavery revolts. Because there was constant slavery revolts, slaves were constantly escaping, constantly killing their masters. So there was a lot of incentives among the slaves to inform on each other. Slaves would be given monetary rewards. They would be allowed to live with their families. Some of them, they would get free if they reported on each other. So infiltration leading up to the 1790s was part of class society. So that's why a lot of times as leftists or Marxists, we focus on capitalism as the different kind of class society, the modern ultimate culmination, blah, blah, blah. But we see infiltration is endemic to class society. In my next video, we're going to start with the 1790s and the French Revolution and show how that encouraged or incentivized the ruling class of England and the ruling classes of Europe to begin these more formal practices of infiltration and policing. All right. Infiltration from BC to 2024, Poet of Theater. Mwah.